Thank you, Professor Saxena, Dr. Deepak Jain, Dr. Agarwal, and Dr. Soumya. It is indeed a great pleasure and honor for me to address this august audience. Throughout my life, I have been an educational planner and a policy maker and promoting management of education, especially among the deprived groups, especially among the disadvantaged groups, both in terms of poor regions of development and social groups which are more disadvantaged and deprived. So when I am talking about research, you may find some remnants of this reflected in my orientation and in my presentation. Friends, when I talk about research, I'll start with making two statements, and my whole presentation will be Professor Saxena. When my time comes to an end, 5 minutes before that, you can show your hands. I will stick to my time that you allocate to me. I would like to start with the two statements, and my whole presentation will be an elaboration of these two statements. The first statement is that research is changing the world. The second statement is that the research world is changing. I think let me take an opportunity to move forward with these ideas. I think the first statement that related to the statement is that if you see the developments that has taken place in the world in the past 2 years, Professor Deepak also mentioned about it, COVID situation, with all the disruptions that has happened, if you look at positively, one thing from the research point of view that has happened, a positive change that has happened is that COVID brought together the scientific research and public policy. A notion, a feeling, an idea that further got concretized that scientific research is required to make rational decisions, which will have rampant ramification for the humanity as a whole. And this is one of the important changes that has made. Many a time, the questions about why do we need research, what is the purpose of this research, what is the relevance of the research that we carry out, I think these questions were put to the back burner. And that is one positive change that I find. The second positive change that I find is that, again, as Dr. Deepak, I listened to him for 10 minutes. Professor Deepak pointed out that, there was a transitioning to digital economy, digital transactions, and many things that we thought that this cannot happen are happening through the virtual mode, which means that initially the resistance to change was substantial, but later when we reached the situation that there is no alternative TNA, people started changing, and that change is substantial, that change is positive, that change has made substantial changes in the teaching learning processes, the learning outcomes, and also the research that we carry out everywhere, So these are two important dimensions of change that has taken place in the world. But these two changes are not with the difficulties. One difficulty is that the disparities or inequalities that are widening in the context of the changing world and the sustainable development goals. I'll come back to this theme again, but let me, for the time being, I say that the world is finding a phenomenon that is not started now. It is a continuation of the past trends, is that minority of the countries are producing majority of the research publications. This is true. Even in terms of the researchers, if you take the researchers per million population, you find that the research output, also the researchers, in both terms, it is getting concentrated in some regions and some locations. Say, for example, the regions of North America, the regions of Southeast Asia, and the region of Europe, accounts for 87% of the research publications as per the science report of UNESCO science report of 2021. This data pertains to 2018-19 because that was the latest available data. But earlier it was 85% in the previous science report, which means that it is only increasing, it is not decreasing. So these disparities in terms of the research output, the disparities in terms of the research capacities that are generated, this is very important. While writing in 2007 about the developing research capacities in the third world countries on behalf of IAEP in UNESCO, when I was working there, we found that one of the major concerns is that how do we develop research capacities in the developing world? I'll come back to this issue, especially in the context of the doctoral study programs and the way doctoral study programs are organized in the world, in different countries, and especially in India. The third dimension that I would like to bring out is that there is the share and the number of researchers are increasing, but public funding for research is declining. I should not say declining, it's not increasing to the same extent. So therefore, this creates a widening disparity between availability of funds and per head availability of research funds for many of the participants. See, for example, in most of the cases, the question that is posed is that how do we finance research? How do we create enabling conditions for research? Can it be done through the public authorities? Can it be done through the private authorities? Should we rely on the market or should we rely on the state? But we are coming to the conclusion that a total reliance on any one of these sectors, either state or the market, will not be sufficient. There is a scope for, there is a need for collaboration and partnership between the two. Say, for example, when you find that the recent trends in research, when I move to the next dimension, recent trends in research, one of the issues that we find is that around 150,000 publications in the year 2019 were in the field of artificial intelligence and also in the field of robotics. Or in other words, these are the two emerging areas, leading areas in terms of research and publication. And most of this research, as I mentioned earlier, most of this research is carried out and publications are carried out, are coming out from the most developed countries in the region, especially Northern American region. That is very important to notice. So secondly, also it is important to see that what is also one finds is the need for sharing of information. Sometimes it is referred to as the open source mode of publications, which is coming up and which is promoted by international agencies like UNESCO, World Bank, etc. As a result of that, during the COVID period, again, this was essential that the information was not collected. Previously, if an information is provided, research finding is found, there people used to collect rarity rent or the rent that is collected because of scarcity. Sometimes it is referred to as scarcity rent. And that used to be the pattern and market orientation. But this trend changed during the COVID period because people felt that the mutations that are taking place needs to be studied and remedial measures needs to be put in place. And for that, there is a need for collective action. And this collective action cannot be confined to a state or a nation, but it should be a collective global action. So we came back to some of the issues related to the need for collective and global action, So that is very, very important part. I think the global challenge, if I have to identify in the context of the changes that are taking place, including the changes during the COVID period, perhaps some of the changes that may continue even during the post-COVID period is to transitioning of the economy to a green economy and to a digital economy. I think these are the two dimensions of change that will lead the changes in the world, in the global world, whether it is a developing country or a developed country or a less developed country. So it is very important to see that. And what is also perplexing, but not surprising, is the extent of inequalities that are developing, the widening of inequalities. So in other words, I will say that the challenge of moving towards or transitioning towards a green economy, a digital economy, without accentuating inequalities forms the framework for decisions and also for research priorities in the coming years. Because the Sustainable Development Goals were created in 2015, were developed, and all the countries accepted it with a clear understanding that how do we promote an inclusive growth and development. Inequalities are emerging as the major global concern. We are moving from a situation of government is the problem in the 1980s to a situation of government is the solution. I find the medical research, and also I find that the need for global action, climate change, etc., brings back to saying that no, we cannot rely on criticizing the government. We have to transform the way the government is functioning. We have to change the way the government is functioning, the way public policy decisions are taken, the way public policy decisions are implemented. This is a dramatic change. So we are inviting state to take a seat, not to take a back seat, but we are providing a front seat now after around 40 years, but not the same state. The state has changed and the state has to change because the state is the problem and the state is the solution. We are coming to that problem, but it is not the same state that you are talking about. Perhaps Ronald Reagan in 1981 said that government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem. And we have moved after 40 years. That was in 1981 statement. After 40 years, we are moving. And I will say that I will quote Amartya Sen, who said that, the society to succeed, they need the invisible hand of the free markets and the visible hand of good governance by the public authorities. So this is a new stage in our development. This is a new phase in our progress, and that needs to be taken into account when we discuss about the research priorities and how the research is changing in this world. As I mentioned, the deciding factor and the influencing force to change the research in this world today is the SDGs are the answer to the concerns of inequalities and the role of public policies. SDGs introduced a set of new global values, a shared vision, a new partnership modalities. The 1980s and 1990s, the world interfaced through the prism of market and globalization. Yes, I will add. Market and globalization. That one finds is that this common destiny is to be defined in terms of inclusion, which means that leaving no one behind, no region behind, and integration of the agenda items and universalities. Now, if I take, I'm told that I have 5 more minutes. So in the 5 more minutes, I will describe about 5 trends in research that is taking place globally. This cuts across science, cuts across social sciences, humanities, arts, and all. It is a general statement. One is that the interdisciplinary orientation that is taking place in the decision-making processes and also in the research processes. And it was Dr. Deepak Jain mentioned about the multidisciplinarity that is taking place. And it is also important to see that liberal arts education is getting an importance in the present day context. The second dimension and change in the research that I find is that basic research, the move from basic research to applied research and applied research orientation that is taking place. And the question is more confined to economic growth, how research is contributing to knowledge production, how it is contributing to knowledge economy. And this assumes an importance. And many a time what one finds is also the fact that the corporate interest in knowledge production has gone up substantially as a result of the growth and expansion, evolution and expansion of the economy, that is the knowledge economy that is taking place. The third trend that I would like to say is that cross-border collaborations are increasing. That is very important to notice that. It's also because of the fact that people realize that the collaborated research are the highly cited research items. And if you go by, if you understand, to illustrate this point, if you go by the Nobel laureates, there are around 1,975 Nobel laureates in the world. Not all of them alive. Nobel Prizes were awarded from 1901 to 2021. And if you see that 40% of these Nobel laureates are from the United States, and 35% of the Nobel laureates are migrants. They were not born and brought up in the United States, So it's also a process whereby a clear indication that the basic research for which the Nobel Prize is awarded is not shared by the nations which are taking the credit for it and the claims for it, but it's also through the flow of knowledge, information, skills, and dexterity that is moving from one state to the other, one country to the other. The fourth dimension that I'll say that increasing cross-border collaboration previously was between the North and the South. That is no longer true. South-South collaborations are increasing. This is true in Latin America. This is true in Asia. And if you see within Asia, countries like China are performing excellently well through their programs of 985 and also 211. And the way in which, the most top-ranked university in Asia is Peking University, number 22. Global ranking is 22. And there is an effort that was made to capitalize on the research capacities, create research capacities, concentrated attention, focused resource allocations that were done. This has helped a lot. The last point that I mentioned within the limited time is that even when research has moved out of universities in many countries, research training has remained almost as a monopoly of the universities. I am talking about the doctoral studies. You find that most of the doctoral studies where the research capacity development that is taking place is substantially and almost entirely, if not almost entirely, is with the universities. But the doctoral studies, I get theses for evaluation from different parts of the world. And what I find is that the nature of thesis is also changing. Previously, it was for academic orientation, to produce researchers and good students, give good lectures in the classrooms in the universities. But many a time, nearly 85% of the doctoral students in some of the countries are getting employment outside the university sector, in the production sector. And with the knowledge economy, the demand for doctorates being appointed in the corporate sector also has increased. This has also changed the way in which the doctoral studies are designed. It is no longer to expand, to extend the frontiers of knowledge within the confines of the disciplinary boundaries. It has undergone dramatic change, and that is a change that you try to see that. So friends, since I had to end, Saxena Sahab, I am finishing. So I will say that the whole research orientation will center around the dimensions of moving towards green economy and a digital economy without expanding or without accentuating inequalities. And SDG goals will form an umbrella organization or a framework for all the research, whether it is in science, whether it is in economics, whether it is in sociology or any other disciplines. Thank you very much.